gospel and Hinduism. Yes.
Wow.
So let's go ahead and begin that. Here's some questions. We're going to talk about Hinduism. Probably going to be divided up to session today and one next week. We'll be probably done with Hinduism, and then we're going to begin with Buddhism. But you will notice that there are similarities.
Are we going to do Sikhism eventually?
No, it's just Hinduism and no Sikhism.
Sikhs believe in a one God.
Interesting.
So,
but you can apply the same principles, though.
Yeah.
Right. The same principle we are learning in Worldviews is how basically I want you to be critical, and when you hear certain things, you have to dig in. You have to ask questions, and in order for you to reach. What do they actually believe, or kind of like dig in? What is their assumptions about life, reality, about God? You see, this is type of statements that could be misleading. Like, we believe in one God. You're going to see a video now we're going to play.
Right.
Someone would say, oh, we're misunderstood, and they, a Hindu apologist kind of like goes against that we say that they are polytheistic religion. And they say, no, we're not polytheists. And then you're like, okay, so what are you? Then he starts to explain something, but then you, at the end, in the final analysis, there are polytheists.
Yes.
So that's the problem.
Vishnu and Shiva. And
so exactly. So that's what it is. So you can, oftentimes worldviews will, they could masquerade as something that sounds more or closer, either because that person lived in the West or lived in a kind of predominantly, I'm not saying that the West is Christian, but has underpinnings of a Christian worldview, right? And so they attempt to bridge the gap between their worldview and the Christian worldview by saying statements like that are not accurate. It cannot be that we cannot say it's not true, because as we're going to see, there are different types, and in Hinduism, the different, what they call yoga, the different paths in order for you to achieve moksha or salvation. We're going to talk about this now. Here's my first question. Who are Hindus and what do they believe? What do you think? Who are Hindus? What do you know about them?
Hinduism is more prevalent in India.
It's more prevalent in India. How many people believe in Hinduism?
I think it's a large percentage of the population.
Yes.
70% or something like that.
Yeah. So they're 1 point something billion. So, close to a billion people, I would say, around 800, 900 million people would believe in Hinduism. And so that's a lot of people. It's a lot of people. You don't feel that there's a lot of Hindus because they are concentrated in one geographical location. That's why you don't see them everywhere. They're about Muslims are a bit more than Hindus, so you see them, but they are all over the world, and they're also not one ethnic group. Well, in India, you can't really say one ethnicity. There's all South Asian though, but they're not. They're different tribes, even have different languages and so on. But when we're talking about the Muslim world, it's actually definitely much more diverse than the South Asian kind of people groups who are in India. Muslims could be African, they could be Asian, they could really be anything. You can have any face to a Muslim, and this is why, at least we think that there are more Muslims. Well, there are technically more Muslims, but Hindus are not far behind, is what I'm trying to say. So what do they believe? So they exist primarily in one geographical location in the country of India, South Asia. What else do we know about them?
I'm pretty sure they believe in reincarnation and nirvana and stuff like that.
Okay, so reincarnation, that's actually true.
If you live a good life, you're elevated to a better life, and next life.
Okay.
If you live a bad life, then you go back down the ladder.
Perfect. So now we come to the first way of salvation, which what they call, maybe not butcher it, it's called Dharma. Make sure I don't butcher it. Yes, that's correct. It's the way of works. Right? So ultimately, the way for them to reach salvation, what they call moksha, they have to be liberated. They have to be liberated from this body. It's very interesting because Gnosticism, the Gnostic belief system, what we call Gnosticism, is in the early church heresy that it also was influenced by Greek philosophy.
They hated the matter. They believed the body was
Exactly. The matter is dirt. It's less than, and what you desire is to be freed from matter and be just spirit, which is this is precisely what the concept of reincarnation comes into play. It presupposes that you are not a physical being. You are ultimately a spirit, just a spirit. You are, according to Hinduism, an eternal spirit. And you have to, the goal, in order for you to achieve moksha or salvation, is that you have to be reincarnate numerous times, and every new incarnation, you are elevated into a higher, you're a better person, you are a higher realm, if you call it that. And then ultimately, when you are so enlightened to a certain level, once you die, you are finally liberated from your material body, and your spirit join what they call the ultimate reality, which is Brahman. Brahman is the ultimate reality for Hindus, and that's what you join, and that's basically the goal. In order for you to be liberated from this body, that what they call, like you would hear probably a lot of New Age people, or even popular spiritual people, which we're going to see next week, they would adopt this type of language. This body is not me. This is just a vehicle. I am inside this body. I am the spirit, the soul inside the body, not the body itself. And so they create this, the body is just like a car. That's the example they would use. Like you get into the car, you are not the car, you are the person in the car. And so they would look at your body as just that, as a car, as a vehicle. And you need to be ultimately liberated from that. And so how do you get liberated from that? Or how do you attain moksha or salvation? They have three paths. The path of work, that's dharma, and the path of devotion, and the path of knowledge. The path of devotion, they call, way of devotion is called bhakti, and the way of knowledge they call jnana. So these are three paths in Hinduism in order for you to achieve enlightenment, or kind of achieve, kind of get freed from what they call samsara, or the reincarnation cycle, until you are liberated and achieve moksha. Now, there are common practices that Hindus believe that are part of their way of just, in order for you to kind of get higher in this caste system. But by the way, they have a caste system. And so some people are in the caste system on different levels. And if you are a priest in the Hindu caste system, therefore you are really close to moksha. But there are also a group of people who are called the untouchables. They're not even ranked in the caste system. They are outside of it completely. The point is, you have to choose one of these paths. And the way you do it, let's say for example, you want to be a good person. If you are a good person, then that's cool. You already chose the way of works. the way of Dharma. If you're a person who wants to seek knowledge, more self-realization, more you want to grow in the knowledge of who you are, that's you can use yoga to get there. Or yoga is like a path of mental, physical, and spiritual discipline that leads to moksha. And how they would put it is that they uses the body, but the objective is to clear your mind from any thought and to have to be liberated from, thoughts that will hinder you from achieving that goal. They have also other practices, like they have mantras, so prayers, chants, utterances, and meditation, part of their worship. They also have ritual bathing, so that's daily bathing before devotion. You do it periodically in rivers that cleans you or cleanses you. And then you can participate in celebration, like in festivals. So you can celebrate history, express different devotions to different gods. So here's the 3-4 practices: yoga, mantras, ritual bathing, festivals. By the way, I'm using here the notes from Radical, which is radical.net. It's by Pastor David Platt. So actually, a lot of the whole series we have been doing, I've been adopting a lot of their, or adapting, I should say, a lot of their material. That's what helps us. Now, we're going to talk about their sacred texts and their beliefs as we have kind of described. I went through Islam, went through atheism, went through some of their beliefs. We're going to dig into that a little bit more later today. Okay. Do you personally know any Hindu people?
Yes.
Yeah? You've met someone? Okay, so how would you describe them? Their lifestyle, their attitude towards Christianity, Christians?
Well, I'm just looking as neighbors. I'm not very close to them.
Yeah.
We speak a little bit, but I haven't experienced exactly what they're living.
So this will be interesting. So this will be a great place to start, right? You're going to be like, hey, I would like to get to know you more. You invite them over, or you go over if they invite you over, and you can have a conversation about what they believe.
I found they're friendly.
Yes.
But it seems to be protective in some way. They're kind of prudent. They got their reason.
Yeah.
It looks now.
Yeah. You look very dangerous, Jim. Very dangerous.
But I mean, because they've been there a long time. So.
Yeah. There's maybe cultural barrier there.
I'm not too sure, but just, I don't know, they seem to function. That's a point of view I have, which may be wrong. I don't know.
I mean, you can invite them over,
Yeah.
and then you can begin to have a conversation with them. And I think people are very interested to share with you about their beliefs, and I mean, most people really have no problem sharing about their belief, unless they are atheists or agnostics. For some reason, I find, this is just purely subjective based on my experience, I find that they're much more reluctant to talk about spirituality and religious stuff. They feel it's very personal, and like, why are you asking me this? They feel it's kind of weird that you would ask that. But those who have spiritual beliefs completely don't mind sharing with you. So if someone is a devout Muslim, they don't mind sharing with you. If someone is a Hindu, Sikh, a Jewish person, they will definitely not have a problem sharing with you. Most of the time, I don't know why, for some reason, those who have and practice spiritual, whatever spiritual belief they espouse, you will find them very open to sharing about what they believe. Not necessarily to convert you, unless they are Muslims or Christians. But other than that, they will just be sharing about what they believe, right? Most of the time. Jerry, do you want to say something?
I work for an Indian family, and most of them are Sikh in the family, but many Hindus from India also work in my company as drivers. So I know several of both the main religions of India, and they're always very polite.
Yeah.
That's one thing. They always call you sir, they're always very
Yes.
polite, always very concerned about how you're doing. So that's something that can open the door for
Yes.
discussion. I just, because it's a work environment, I'm not feeling very like, you know what I mean? I don't want to get into that.
Yes, of course. Of
There's
course.
some things that you shouldn't talk about, or
No,
like
of course.
religion and politics.
Yes.
They know I'm a Christian,
Yes.
and I know that they're Sikh or they're Hindu.
Yeah.
But whether or not it's appropriate to get into the depth of it
Yeah.
at work is probably like, you know.
Yeah, I think the best way
So-
is you being inquisitive.
Yeah.
You just asking and inquiring about someone's belief is really, I don't think it will become a problem, unless of course you're trying to debunk their beliefs, which I suggest in the workplace,
Yeah.
don't do that. You want to get to know them a little bit more before you start to kind of employ apologetics or anything in that, in any capacity, but use wisdom of course in that. But just inquiring, like on a break, and you just, or lunch break or something like that, maybe you can just inquire and ask questions. And once you start to get that, once they actually know that you are genuinely interested about what they have to say, most people will be very inclined if you say, hey, let's go grab a cup of coffee after, I want to know more about this, or let's meet up sometime in the weekend and let's talk more about this. I think they would be very open to that. You can say, hey, take me to an Indian restaurant that you love. I love Indian food.
Me too.
Indian cuisine is like, now I'm thinking about it, I want to go grab some Indian food. But anyway, but they are
My
very
boss
kind.
buys us Indian food the last Friday of every month. We have a feast.
Oh man.
So, yeah.
Okay, it's happening. It's happening today. It's happening today.
Thailand dish is just across the street. It's like the best butter chicken in town.
Oh, okay. We'll talk after.
Yeah.
All right, here's another question. Are you intimidated at the thought of sharing the gospel with a Hindu?
No.
No, well, if you don't know them, Buddhists that go out. If I haven't met anybody, why would I be intimidated? I don't know them, right? And they're really kind people, like Jared said. Okay, so now let's watch a video. And now I want you to pay close attention to this video, because after we're going to ask some questions, and you need to be just pay attention. So this is, by the way, just maybe context here. This is a BBC TV show. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's a very famous TV show called The Big Questions. And they often talk about, which is by the way, a cool TV show, because they talk often about really difficult topics. Often worldview, existential type of questions about life, about even like Islam and terrorism, and like really controversial even. And they would bring a group of, so you have an audience, and you have the first row are usually people who represent different views. And so they're invited to the show, and different people are from different kind of, in this episode, the big question is, if you see at the top, are many gods better than one? That's the question of the episode. You see? I mean, it's a really cool TV show. So, and you will have there, you can see, there's a Muslim imam there, always look at the front row. There's a Muslim imam there, third from left, and next to him, a Roman Catholic priest. You see him with a black on a collar. You have an Anglican priest there. He's on a gray shirt, also with a collar. And I'm assuming he's Roman Catholic, could be a Lutheran. So I wouldn't know. It could be a Baptist like me. I mean, I wear black with a collar. But anyway, that's a different topic. And so he will now ask a Hindu apologist or expert, someone who knows Hinduism, about this question. Are many gods better than one?
Good morning. Yeah, many gods better than one. Hinduism is really interesting.
Okay, hold on, let me try to connect this.
Yeah, Jay.
Good morning. Hi, Jay.
Yeah, many gods better than one. Now, Hinduism is an incredibly interesting religion.
Indeed.
We've read about it a lot over the last
Indeed.
week or so.
Indeed.
Very complex, very flexible, and very many people believe many different things.
Indeed.
But some of whom believe in many gods and goddesses.
You see, Hinduism is sometimes misunderstood to be a polytheist religion. Means believing in lots of ultimate realities. This is a contradiction in terms. You can't do more than one ultimate, it's not ultimate enough. Hinduism has never been a polytheist tradition. It has always been a very mature, pluralistic tradition. Not many gods, but many ways to relate to the idea of spirituality. It can incorporate monotheism, means accepting one supreme personality. It can incorporate non-theistic approaches as well as non-religious approaches for making spiritual progress. This is called spiritual democracy, and the lovely word is religious pluralism. Many pathways for exploring spirituality.
So it's the same, there is one ultimate supreme being.
Not being, it's a principle that underpins this reality, which is essentially spiritual rather than material, that manifests itself at different layers. There's the material level, and this demarcation between, if you like, man, God, and universe is very artificial. It is time we demolish this.
Is this the way out? Is this the way out for the Church of England out of their early on, you thought they were talking about different gods.
I'm listening to Jay and thinking, gosh, perhaps I'm a Hindu. The word pluralism in a way resolves the issue of intra-faith dialogue as well. Forget about interfaith, intra-faith dialogue. But this is the way I relate to the idea of spirituality. This is the way you relate to
So
the
there are
idea
different aspects to
different ways of relating to the idea of
the
spirit.
supreme power.
Ultimate
There are
reality.
different ways of seeing that supreme
Indeed.
power. The supreme power has many different faces and
Indeed.
related to
Indeed. In fact,
Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva.
whatever, and there's a principle even, not
Yeah.
as a personality, there's a principle that underpins reality called spirit. So in a way, this gives freedom for different people, depending on their own temperament, to relate to the idea of spirituality suited to their own temperament.
And some are goddesses too.
Indeed, why should God always be a father? Mother goddess is my lovely idea as well.
This is the thing that the Semitic religions can never understand. The West is really confused. In all other religions, mainly all religions, there is one God, one book, one way. This alone the Semitic religions can understand. There is a Quran, there is an Allah, and there is one textbook or path of devotion to Him. In Christianity, the same. But when you come to the East, the poor Western students get really confused. It's not their fault. They have been traditionally, from the lap of the mother onwards, they have been taught only that there is one God, one way, one book. When you come to Hinduism, many gods, confused. What is the way? Every individual has got his own personal yoga. As many ways as there are people. Oh, but who is your prophet? It's not who, but it is a whole population of prophets, because all the rishis. Which is your Bible? I will show you, if you can come with me, I will show you. Why? Library. Rooms and rooms of, and shelves after shelves. All these are our scriptures. Oh, right. If this is your scripture, who is the author? Muhammad, Muhammad had a revelation, and he recorded that. There is a Quran. Jesus expounded, and the disciples wrote it out. There is a Bible. Buddha discussed all his lifetime, and after his time, the disciples sat together and collected all these from their memory and recorded them. This is a scripture. Who is the author of Hinduism? I will tell you. But you are all very scientific-minded people. I am an illiterate. Could you tell me who is the author of physics?
So you start to see there are complexities. Here's a definition. Hinduism is a complex set of religions. Mixing pantheism, the belief that God is everything and everything is God. That's pantheism. That means God is in everything. You know, I'm sure you heard Oprah Winfrey probably said this. God is everywhere. He's in the trees. He's in the ocean. He's in the right. So that's actually as a religious belief. It's called pantheism. And so it mixes pantheism with polytheism. That is the belief of numerous gods. That many gods exist. So there are over 330 million gods in Hinduism, each of which is a part of one ultimate spiritual reality that's called Brahman. Here's my first question. According to J. Lakhani of the Hindu Academy, as we saw in the first clip, the big questions, how many ultimate realities are there? And what is religious pluralism?
Religious pluralism is really just polytheism said in a different way. Like, honestly, like I giggled when he said that because I'm like, he's denying that he's a polytheist, but then he's saying religious pluralism as if it's like a different thing, but it's really the same thing.
Yes,
it really is. They're synonymous. There's a different way of saying it. It's ridiculousness. Honestly,
and that's what it gets a bit tricky and even frustrating because you're trying to pin down what do you believe. But he says, what do I believe? What does he believe? What does she believe? We all have different.
Like it's like man decides what he's gonna believe.
Yes, and that is your yoga. That is your way. Right? If you choose the path of knowledge, the path of dharma or works, or the path of devotion, bhakti, that's your way.
It's a form of Pelagianism or Arminianism.
Yeah.
It's works righteousness.
Yes, exactly.
It's just another heresy among tons of other heresies.
That's correct. That's correct. That's very good. But according to him, we need to understand Hinduism according to their belief.
Yeah.
According to him, how many ultimate realities there are in Hinduism?
Infinite.
Infinite?
As many as there are people.
Huh? No? Wrong. He already said. He said there cannot be many ultimate realities because if there is another ultimate, there's not ultimate enough. He said there is one ultimate reality. And when the speaker, the British guy said, yeah, so one being. He's like, no, not a being. Notice. So you cannot say he's a personal being. It's just a reality. It's a principle, according to him, that underpins the reality in which we live. And so matter is not reality. The spirit is reality. And therefore, he says, so the principle, the ultimate reality is that spirit. And they call it Brahman. And so salvation is to become one with the ultimate reality. That is Brahman. That's moksha. That's salvation for a Hindu. So, what is religious pluralism according to him then?
Different ways to reach reality.
Yes. So he actually was proud of this idea. That means it's a mature, that's what he used, a mature spiritual belief system. Mature because you're mature when you allow, according to him, many different views and many different types of devotion to the gods. And so you are mature. Because put it negatively, you are immature. I mean, not you. I'm talking about like the spiritual belief. A spiritual belief system is an immature belief system if it did not incorporate other beliefs. this belief system is childish. It thinks there's only one way. But because Hinduism is a mature belief system, it is a belief system that can incorporate and encompass all other belief systems. And that's his point. Religious pluralism is allowing other ways to the ultimate reality. You want to call it God? No problem. You go ahead. But here's what's interesting. They say we believe in religious pluralism, and there's many ways to the divine. But notice when he said being, the ultimate reality is a being. Because once you use that word being, what are you smuggling in? Something that they refuse.
Person.
Huh?
Person.
Person. A personal, ultimate God. They are rejecting this. And so, obviously, there's a problem with that. If you're saying there's religious pluralism, and Christianity is one way to that ultimate reality, but Christianity says there is that the ultimate reality is not just this ambiguous principle, it is God. There's no such thing as ultimate reality, as a matter of fact. There is just God, who created everything, including spiritual beings, by the way. So where do you fit that? They are mutually exclusive. You cannot say, I believe in an ultimate reality that is not a being, and say, I'm mature enough to incorporate Christianity, because Christianity says, because it criticizes, as a matter of fact, it says this whole belief system is wrong. So how can you incorporate Christianity? How's that possible? Because they fundamentally disagree on what is what underpins reality as we know it, right? And so, is it a being? Is there one God, or is it this principle, this Brahman reality, a spiritual reality that nobody knows about, or many ways too? Okay. Based on both Hindu apologists, what are their underlying objections to monotheism? Go ahead.
Well, to me, I don't know if I followed well, but I think they have to reject that. I see two reasons. They're going to disagree someone first, and then they're going to have to be accountable. If it's a being, if it's God, you're accountable to.
Yes.
You might not please everyone around you. You might not have the words of wisdom and look good, but you're going to please to someone. You're going to be accountable to someone, not to. So it might look from their point of view, just like postmodernism, it might look uncomfortable. It might have some exigence. How do you say that in English? It might ask something of you. It might ask you to be there.
You're tapping into something very important, Joe.
Well, at first, that's what I
That's the first impression? Okay. This is really key. So what are their what do you think their underlying objection to monotheism? Mono meaning one, theism, gods, one God. They have a problem with that concept.
It's the accountability.
Accountability. What else?
lack of peace, lack of being, in a peaceful area with pleasing everybody and being so wise that everybody says, oh, he's a peaceful man and he doesn't insult anybody.
Because you can accept, you're more accepting of people,
Don't upset
and so on.
etc. Be the good guy, the nice guy.
But what about the accountability? Let's lean into this accountability. So why does that make them feel uncomfortable?
Because they want to be accountable to themselves and their own spiritual climb to Brahma. But if you have to follow God, the one way, then that's like a narrow path that they don't want to like something.
You're too limited. You're restricting them.
Exactly.
You know, and that's why there are many hundreds of millions of gods, is because I can create and be devoted to different gods. As many as there are desires in a human heart, there are the gods that satisfy these desires. And that's why there are hundreds of them, because they are created gods.
Right.
They are gods that were created by man and for man.
It's just like the Greek gods. or the
Exactly.
Roman gods.
Exactly. But if you're going to say there is one God, then hold on a second. That means he's a personal being. That means he created us here with a purpose. Going back to origin, meaning, morality, and destiny. That means there is an underpinning purpose, and he has defined that purpose, and there is no other way other than that purpose. And so they object to that underlying objection to monotheism. It is too restrictive. It is too narrow, and ultimately it's even bigoted. Why? Because you are reducing the whole world with all the people and their ideas and their beliefs to just one path of devotion, according to them. One path? Really? Like that just sounds so, according to them, so what?
Intolerant.
Intolerant. So intolerant, it is so immature, and it is so narrow-minded. It is narrow-minded. It is not something that grapples with, from their perspective, there's billions of people. There has to be more ways. It cannot be just one way. Now, here's another question. What is the problem with the truth proposition that asserts one ultimate reality attained through many ways? I already alluded to that.
The multiplicity of deity and stuff. You're making gods to please man and not man to please God. It's just like,
But if you create a God that likes what you do,
exactly. Like,
then you're pleasing God.
exactly.
You're never wrong.
You're creating your own idols and just like fulfilling your own desires.
Yes.
Out of the heart, blasphemy and wickedness comes, right?
Of course.
And so it's out of the heart these wanted desires that they have.
That's right.
They're creating these gods to appease what they want so they could live the way they want.
That's correct.
There's no moral standard.
There's no more standard.
Bro, I just realized that.
They don't have a moral.
Exactly.
There's no moral
You hit
compass.
the nail on the head.
Right. There is no moral standard because everything now goes. Then the question will be, hold on a second. You
Making
say,
God to do whatever you want to
so what does it mean?
That's kind of what Muhammad did too, when he was abrogating what he was saying at first, when he first started preaching and stuff, and started abrogating, he was creating new revelation from Allah to justify what he was doing later in his life.
That's correct.
So it's just another heresy. It's just following the same pattern that the devil has laid out since the beginning. Really.
That's correct. So, but there's a problem with that. If there's no moral, objective moral standard, you have a problem. So, if there's a way to moksha that is called the way of dharma, right? The way of works. Then what works? Who defines the works?
Man,
But that's the problem. Like, so who? What if I think I'm going to create a deity, and I think thievery is okay. And so I can just continue thieving. I'm a thief. And that's a good thing? So who decides then? If there's 330 million gods, who decides what is the right works?
Moral standard in anything.
Yeah, even if we concede to them, okay, their way of works, fine. What works? Who defines the works? What is the standard of good works according to you? If I have my own yoga and everyone has their own yoga, Another problem. The way of knowledge. Whose knowledge? What knowledge? Who defines knowledge? It goes back to the presupposition. Who are you? If you're saying you're attacking monotheism, but you have to say, who is your source? That's why when they asked him, he'd been asked before, who is the author? Who is the author? And then he responds,
We have a library.
we have a library of scriptures. We have all of these things. Who is, then he talked about, then he went to physics. Who is the author of physics?
So he deferred it. He didn't answer the question.
Well,
he just diverted the question.
but
so
There's one ultimate author.
Exactly. But here's the problem.
There's
So
one ultimate author.
he thinks this is a gotcha question.
Yeah.
But who's the author of physics?
Because even those authors realize those realities.
Yes.
So they didn't fight physics. Physics was already there.
Yes, exactly.
By an ultimate intelligent being.
Yes.
They just realized those realities.
Yes.
So they didn't bring physics to life. They didn't create physics.
Exactly.
God created physics
That's exactly.
and interprets physics based on
Yes.
their
And
study of
what's
science
interesting
of
about physics, it's an intelligent, really not only one equation, many equations, a set of rules, if you will, mathematical equations that are so perfectly made for the world to function.
Amen.
So who put who wind up that clock?
I believe he asked a question. That's what I understood. That he asked the question to tell us, see, there is no author.
Yes.
Yeah.
See, I can prove it. Who is the author of physics? You can't answer that. That's the proof. It's intelligent and there is no God. That's what he was saying.
Yes, he's implying.
And you answered, God did it.
Yeah.
You know, he's in trouble with that.
Yes.
Yes.
Because he would tell you, you would say God, and they would say, okay, you're saying he's one being, he's a being, where is he? That's his probably a gotcha kind of corner. Where is this one being? So there's that truth. The problem with the truth proposition that asserts one ultimate reality attained through many ways is that they are mutually exclusive. They could be mutually exclusive. That is to say, they could compete. Whatever they believe, let's say, okay, I'm a Christian, I want to be a Hindu, I want to go into Hinduism because it's a mature belief system, right? Okay, so I'm going to go in there and I'm going to say the Ten Commandments is the moral law, is a summary of the moral law. And that's the only way for us to be saved according to my religious system, my religious belief, because it's a bunch of religions, right? It's a pluralistic system, is through Jesus. Then they will say, hold on a second, you cannot say there's only one way. But you just said my belief system is accepted. No, but you are saying there's one way. Yeah, and there's only one being who created everything. No! It's Brahman. You just said you're mature enough to say that you incorporate what I said. But they cannot be both true. It is a fallacy. It makes no sense. You cannot have two directly contradicting claims. There's one being, no, there is no being. These two things cannot exist in the same religious system. It's either there is or there isn't. And so, it comes back to this
Objective truth versus subjective.
exactly, relative truth.
Yeah.
But relative truth is posing itself as a tolerant kind of view. Truth is relative. But is that truth statement absolutely true?
There is
So,
objective truth.
hold on, you see what I said? Okay. Truth is relative. But is that statement that truth is relative is an absolute truth? So you cannot say there's many gods, many ways to God, and at the same time incorporate a belief system that says, no, there's only one way to God. So it falls. The whole premise of a mature, pluralistic worldview falls apart because it is denying other things. It is denying other other beliefs.
Contradicts its own belief system by doing those things.
Exactly.
Right?
That's,
It's kind of, anyways.
so how do the Hindu truth claims contradict the Bible?
Well, we just said there's no objective truth to them. It's all subjective. It's all just about the reality that they want to believe in. But we believe that God has given us His objective truth through Scripture, and that's the only way. It's the only way that we have, like, that God spoke to us. This is the record of God speaking to us, and the record of God's work in the world.
So they would think we have a library of all sorts of books, and so therefore this is a good thing. This shows you
That's great science fiction.
that
That's not true.
they have a lot of knowledge because they have many libraries of books. But the reality is, it would say, okay, we have a lot of books in one book, and this all you need to live a godly life. Well, these are two different truths. And I would believe, if you're able to give me all that I need to live a godly life in one book, as opposed to a library of many thousands of books, then I think this is more miraculous than having many thousands of books. That if I need just one word, the Word of God, that is the sword of the Spirit, is the only thing that I need to know God and live a godly life, that is more miraculous to me than library of scriptures and scriptures and scriptures that are unending.
Just something.
Go ahead.
So I was thinking the Bible contains all knowledge. They say they have libraries of books.
Yes.
But they definitely do not have the knowledge, like the full knowledge. Because the scripture gives us full knowledge for us to be able to edify, grow, and become Christ-like, right?
Yes.
But they have a library, and there's tons of knowledge. So there's some knowledge they are lacking, meaning that even though they say they want to follow the way of knowledge, they're still lacking some knowledge.
Yes. Because they can, exactly.
Yes,
because they're not incorporating the Bible. They would put the Bible there though. It is there. But everything in this Bible contradicts everything around it. The rest of the books that are there. So anyways, it makes no sense. It's illogical. Okay. So based on our discussion thus far, so here's how we're gonna wrap it up. This is just kind of like a summary of what we discussed. We're gonna go through what is, in their view, what is God or the supreme being in their view. How do they view Jesus Christ? What are their foundational texts or sources of authority? What do they believe the human nature to be? What is the basic human problem they're trying to solve, and what is the solution to that problem? And what do they believe about life after death? What do they believe about God as supreme being? Busun, read.
Many gods who are forms of one supreme reality, Brahman.
So they believe there are many gods, but all of these are manifestations or forms of one spiritual reality, that is Brahman. See, don't think Brahman here doesn't mean this is not a god. This is just what they.
Of all their gods.
Yeah, it's a spiritual reality, and then the question will be like, okay, what created that spiritual reality?
They invented it themselves.
Well, they would say, this is an uncreated reality. This is the reality, this is the ultimate supreme reality that underpins this reality, underpins all reality. That's their answer. It will be like, this is like the way you would say, someone tells you, well, who created God? You say, God is self-sufficient. God is the one who created everything. He is the first cause of all that exists. There is no creator before God. It misunderstands the very concept of monotheism. So they would say, well, like that is Brahman. Brahman is always been there, spiritual reality that always existed. And then you will ask the question, okay, if this supreme reality always existed, how come are we here? Why are we here? If the material world is here, then who created this material world? Because this Brahman is not a personal being. It's just,
The ultimate spiritual.
it's an ultimate spiritual reality. It doesn't think, it doesn't have intelligence. It's not dictating and deciding. Then another question is, who created this system called samsara or reincarnation? Who made that system?
Who created the earth? Who created the universe?
No, but like they're saying you want to become, well, who created the world? Us in it. And who created the system through which you achieve moksha? Who created the system of the caste system, the reincarnation back and forth, and the whole karma? This is where karma comes in, right? You have a good karma, you get reincarnated to a higher person. If you have bad karma, then you go down. So you become, I don't know, a plant or something, an animal instead of a human being, and so on. Or you can go up in a higher caste system, higher caste level, whatever. The point is, who created that system?
They created themselves.
But you understand? You see the problem? If this is not a being, because he rejected that when he said that's supreme reality is a being. He said no, not a being, not a being. That means not a personal being. He's not intelligent being who's creating and systematizing the way to salvation. He's not doing that. They reject that. So there's a problem there. You can maybe explore as you talk to someone who is Hindu. What do they believe about Jesus Christ, Jill?
One of many spiritual teachers, neither atoned for sin nor rose from the dead.
Yeah, yeah, the immature one.
Well, exactly. So you say you're mature, but you don't believe in. Okay, that's fine. So that's what they think of Jesus, right? They think Jesus like Muhammad, like we just heard in the sermon. He's just one of many teachers. What are the foundational texts? We didn't talk about this, but this is really complicated. You heard, he already said they have many texts. So here's well, you can read this and I'll add some more. So go ahead, Jared, read that.
Foundational texts, sources of authority, the Vedas, including the Samhitas, the
Brahmana.
Sorry, my eyesight is not good to read from far. So the Upanishads containing the Bhagavad Gita. Right.
Okay.
Sorry.
So the Vedas are the oldest inspired sacred writings in Hinduism.
Right.
The most well-known sacred writing is the Bhagavad Gita. This is the most common one, which is one of the Upanishads, which we're going to get to know more about them later. So, if you were to ask, what is the Upanishads then? If this is the most popular one, what is the Upanishads? The Upanishads are sacred writings that contain mythical stories and philosophical teachings. Other sacred writings include the Samhitas, are praise songs to the gods. The Brahmanas it's a guide to the priests outlining rituals and prayers. And the Aranyakas are instructions on worship and meditation. Okay, so they have catechisms.
I have because scripture, we know that it's reviewed, right?
Yes.
It was inspired by the Holy Spirit.
Yes.
And they say they have a supreme reality, light. And this reality is not a being.
Yes.
So, if they have all this text,
Yes.
and it's not revealed to them, how are they sure this text are actually what they need to get there?
Because it was written by people who are enlightened.
Who decides what's
I'm lost, bro.
there's nothing objective. There's
The
no
priests.
Right, but like who decides
Yeah,
what that level of priesthood should be?
Jared, you're thinking too much.
But I mean, it's just like it's. No, but
Yeah, no, that's
honestly,
correct.
like,
That is
these
that's
questions,
absolutely true.
they
Who,
can't answer
well, who are
these
the
questions
priests?
if you
Who,
ask them, so-
well, that's what it is. So it began. So they would say, well, Hinduism is a very old religious system. So someone who was enlightened who wrote down sacred writings, and someone else who was also enlightened said, "Oh, this I use this in order for me to achieve another level of enlightenment, and here's what I discovered," and so on.
Who are these someones?
They're enlightened persons.
It's just imaginations, bro. Let's just say that.
It's mythical. So these are some of the mythical stories and you're gonna see a testimony. Actually, I'm gonna play next week a testimony of this girl. We call it testimonies. I mean, it's Christian lingo, but it's basically she's testifying to how she became a Hindu. So she's a girl from the States, and she grew up Roman Catholic, and she became a Hindu. Like she knows Hinduism, and she will explain more from her perspective. It's very good. I'm not an expert in Hinduism. That's why I have an aid to help us understand Hinduism. But that's why it's very helpful to hear from Hindus themselves. How do they express Hinduism? Like Jay, we just heard from in the big question, and like the other guru, and we're gonna hear from two other people in the videos. We're gonna hear from this young lady who left Roman Catholicism, became a Hindu. She's a very devout Hindu, and she's explaining from her perspective how can we understand Hinduism. So she's very helpful, so you can understand a little bit more. The point of these sessions is to help you kind of get started on some of the basics of Hinduism, and kind of like for us to have critically think through this. And then you're able to, when you go and you talk to your Hindu friends, neighbors, then you're able to kind of, okay, so you have an idea. You're not just completely novel. You have at least a beginner's idea of what is going on. So you can have a really fruitful, interesting conversation with them. Hopefully that leads to the gospel. What do they believe about human nature? Ed?
Human nature, the human spirit lives in a physical body which dies and is reborn until reunited with Brahman.
I already talked about that. Okay. What is the basic human problem, Bosu?
The individual is trapped in the cycle of reincarnation, ignorant of its potential.
So that's the problem. The problem is human beings, these poor spirits, are trapped in this physical body matter, in this matter that is bad. It's bad. They need to be liberated from that. That's their goal, right? That's the problem.
So that's the problem. Why did their gods create it?
Well, they would say, well, here's the problem. Did they create them? Who created this?
Exactly, but that's the thing, right? So, like, if this exists and this is a problem, their whole religious system makes no sense.
Exactly.
Like, none whatsoever. It's silliness. It's just ridiculousness. Like, if Brahma is the ultimate, why did Brahma create all of this?
Well, you're assuming Brahman is a being.
Right.
He's not.
Right.
Or it's not. It's not a being.
Right, but like, who created all this then?
They probably believe in evolution, I guess.
Oh, I don't
Because
know.
that's where they can run to, bro. Like,
Exactly. I have no idea if they would, but they would probably allow incorporation of that. Okay, what's a solution to the problem? Okay, I'm working. Okay, what's the solution to the problem?
Liberation from reincarnation and realization of oneness with Brahman through good works, meditation, or devotion.
And these are three paths, right? So the solution to the problem is to be liberated from this reincarnation cycle and realizing or achieving the moksha, which is the spirit. That spirit is liberated from the material universe and becoming one with the ultimate reality, and that is salvation. And you can achieve that through the three paths, right? The dharma, the bhakti, and the Third one is the Dharma, Bhakti, and Jnana. Jnana is the way of knowledge, Dharma is the good works, and Bhakti is the way of devotion.
Who defines what's good, and who are you devoted to?
Exactly. Exactly.
That's actually true.
Who are you you're devoting to? Exactly. That's very interesting. Who are you devoted to?
Exactly.
And is
who
that
defines
God?
your good works?
Is that God then can deny you entrance into Brahman, right? Is he a creator? What powers do they have, or do every God have their own power? Right? Are they previous people who attained ultimate reality and they became a god? So all of these are great questions to your Hindu friends. Okay, life after death. What do they believe about life after death? The individual. Go ahead, Busu.
The individual will be reincarnated or reborn as an achieving liberation.
Okay, so that's what it is.
Liberation from what?
From the body.
I know you know, but this is what I'm going to ask the people. What
Yes.
liberation from what?
Yeah, why is matter so bad?
Right.
They will point out, as we're going to see later in Buddhism, it's pain and suffering in this world.
Right. So liberation from sin. And the way is Jesus.
There you go. That's the gospel. Well, guys, thank you so much. Next week, we're going to continue on Hinduism. We're going to hear from people who were Hindu and also going to kind of talk more about this. I'll see you next week.